Recently, a friend of mine reached out to me because he knew that I had some background with plumbing and asked if I knew anything about water heaters, because his water heater had not only failed, it had ruptured. So I asked him some questions about it and found out that this water heater wasn't in a garage. It wasn't in a place where, the water would spill out on concrete and go away. It was inside of his house in a closet. And all of the water had saturated all the carpet. It had gone through into the crawl space. It was puddling down there. All the wood in the crawl space was soaked. And so we had two issues here to deal with. One, we needed a new water heater in his house so that he could have warm water. But two, and the bigger issue, was we needed to deal with all this moisture before it grew mold. So that's what we're gonna talk about here in this video today. It's not uncommon for a water heater when it fails to rupture and have that be the main cause of failure. That's because inside of our water heaters, we get a lot of corrosion over time. In fact, we know that's going to happen, and so every water heater has on it a rod, a metal rod that goes straight down through it called an anode rod. And it's there specifically to be the thing that corrodes. It's a chemistry thing. I also have a chemistry background. It is a chemistry thing. But essentially, all of the minerals and things that are gonna cause corrosion inside of your water heater, they choose instead to corrode that rod. But every approximately 8 years, that rod should probably be replaced. But most homeowners don't know that. We're not gonna talk any more about the water heater here today. We'll talk about anode rods. I'll show you how to replace one of those one of these days here soon. In fact, I'll try to link to the video here once I have one. But the problem is when people don't replace those, the inside of that water heater, the tank itself, corrodes. It rusts. And what happens when it rusts? That eats through the metal, and we end up with holes in the actual tank itself. When that happens, there's no saving the water heater. If your water heater is literally leaking from the tank, it's toast. It needs to be replaced. But also what happens is that entire water heater will empty itself out. 50 gallons, 80 gallons, it'll empty itself out onto the ground. That's why your water heater has to be in a pan, and why that pan should drain to outside. Now my friends did, but the water came out too quickly. It overflowed that pan. In fact, it looked like that piping might have gotten a little bit clogged. So it just overflowed and just poured out everywhere. When I got there, the water pan was still full and still pouring over. So here's a first step. If your water heater's rupturing, first things first, turn off the water to the water heater. He did that. In fact, he had turned off the water to the whole house because he didn't have a valve. In fact, he had a valve going into the water heater. You're supposed to. He had one, but the valve had failed and he couldn't, and turning it didn't do anything. So he had to shut off the water to the whole house. But do that, because if you don't do that, it's just gonna literally keep pouring out onto the floor, or worse, into your basement or crawl space. But then we gotta clean this up. So here's what we did to prevent mold. First, I got that old water heater out of there so we had an open space to work with. And then the next thing that we did is we started trying to soak up as much out of the carpet and the pad as we possibly could. The best way to do this is if you have a carpet shampooer. You don't have to put any shampooer water down, you just run it over the top and it just sucks it up into the dirty tank of the carpet shampooer. With that, we were able to pull up a ton of water out of the carpet and save the carpet and the pad. Typically, the pad is gonna end up just ruined. It's gonna end up moldy. But because of this and the next step that we did, we were able to save the carpet, the pad, and prevent mold in the crawl space. The next thing we did is we used this. This is a dehumidifier. It's a commercial dehumidifier from Turbo. I was actually really fortunate. I had just gotten this a month before and hadn't really had a need to use it. I got it. One of the main use cases I have for it is actually drying out wood. We have some property up in the mountains that we share with family, and we have lumber rights, and we 30 acres of just trees that we forest, and we have our own lumber mill. And so yes, I'll dry the wood kind of in a kiln, but I can dry it out a lot faster, and I can even dry it out just here in my garage if I can create a really dry environment. So that's what I got the dehumidifier for. But I had it, and so that's what we did. That's what we used. This dehumidifier from Turbo is capable, especially in an area like that, in an enclosed like the crawl space where it's just saturated. Let me pull up the numbers. This kind of blew my mind. 165 pints of water out of the air per day. If at 95 degrees, 90% relative humidity. So it's if the air's pretty well saturated with water, you're gonna be able to get a ton of water out a day. So this is super easy to run. There's a couple of different options for how it drains. So it'll actually store some water inside of it, and then you can press the drain button and it'll drain all of it out at once. Or you can set it to continuous so it can just keep running all the time. And with that, you'd want to have a hose coming out the side going in to a bucket. So it comes with this hose. You just attach the hose right there and it'll just drain it out. It had no problem draining kind of up So I guess it pumps it out pretty well. You can set a timer on it. And mostly it's just turn it on and let it run. So I can set a timer. The number there is actually telling me the relative humidity, I believe. The up and down is just for the timer. Yeah, drain continuous. I just set it to continuous, hooked up the hose, and we're good to go. I press power and it turns on. Now, this was in the summer, so it was warm, but even if it's only like 80 degrees and down at 60% humidity, 80 pints a day. That's 10 gallons. 10 gallons of water a day. We were having it drain into this 5-gallon bucket, so emptying this like twice a day. And that's basically what we had to do. But the cool thing is, it quickly pulled the moisture out of the wood, the floorboards up above, and all the floor joists, as well as off the ground. You can see in these little video clips I took at the time, there was water puddling all over the ground. And it's not just gonna go into the ground, because in your crawl space, you should have some of this plastic down on the ground. You're supposed to have a vapor barrier. You're not supposed to have that moisture getting up into like your floor and stuff. So we put down this vapor barrier. But that means that the moisture that comes down from your water heater is just gonna sit there, and it's just gonna stay super humid and mold like crazy. We ran the dehumidifier for about a week. We just let it keep running right down there in the crawl space, emptying the bucket as needed, and managed to prevent thousands of dollars worth of work and a large insurance claim because we just had a dehumidifier. So having had the opportunity to test out this dehumidifier from Turbo, I stand by it. I think it's a good one. It also is well priced. Turbo is a brand. I've also got a fire pit of theirs. They make a lot of heating stuff. They make fire pits, but also like electric fireplaces. And they also make like a garage radiant heater. They make a bunch of cool things like that. And they're available on Amazon and at a lower price than what you would often pay for commercial level type products like this. I just know I'm glad I had access to it. Most people probably don't need a commercial dehumidifier for their home, but if you have a use case for it, or maybe it's one of those things where it's like between you and other family members and friends, like you go in on it together, or one of you buys it and everybody else borrows it as needed. I'm certainly willing to loan mine out. I don't have a lot of use for it day by day, but when you need one, you're gonna be really glad you have one. And believe it or not, I've probably had at least 3 times in my life where a dehumidifier was really needed, specifically because of a flooded crawl space. So I guess moral of the story is, don't let water ruin your house. Don't let water cost you thousands and thousands of dollars. If you need to go rent a dehumidifier, or if you know someone that has one, or you wanna just go buy your own, that's gonna save you thousands of dollars. Don't just assume it'll probably dry out on its own, because it won't. Not if it's in an enclosed space like a crawl space. You know, other use cases for dehumidifiers are if you do live in a more humid environment, you know, basements and stuff can often get a lot of mold just in day-to-day use. I lived in Brazil for a while, and when I was there, I mean, we had mold growing inside everywhere. Any kind of place where it would get kind of dark, we'd have mold growing because it was just so humid. And so in like a basement or other enclosed area, running a dehumidifier on a regular basis can help just bring that humidity down and eliminate the mold, prevent the mold from ever happening. So long story short, we got the old water heater out of there. We dried it out the best we could, dried out the carpet with the carpet cleaner, put in a new water heater, but then use this to do the rest of the job. Just ran it in the crawl space and it dried everything out from underneath and worked beautifully, prevented all the mold, and got his house back to normal with water running right away. And a huge part of it was because of this. So if you have any questions about this or about dehumidifiers in general or about other interesting things, water heaters, that kind of stuff, let me know in the comments below. I'd love to make more content. We can talk water heaters. I can show you how to replace one when I get an opportunity to replace one. We can talk about the anode rod. I can show you how to replace those and how to upkeep your water heater to prevent this kind of thing, hopefully, from ever happening. Thanks for joining me today here on Fixter. We'll see you all in our next video.